decided to make home in Houston, Texas, which was Plymouth Rock for us. I was a walking ball of difference. I like to consider myself as a design technologist. I've always been fascinated by puzzle pieces. I've seen how Google works. I've seen how Microsoft works. The Facebook community has grown over 300,000 people strong, and it's why many people refer to me as Mr. Future Work. As an entrepreneur, you should always be open to pivoting. We pivoted around when COVID-19 happened. The what can look different, but the why can never change. There's a lot of founders and a lot of entrepreneurs give up too soon. It ensures that you're looking proactively for diverse founders. You don't live where the world is. You live where the world is going.
What's up, Unfound Nation? Dan Kihanya here. Thanks so much for listening in to another episode of Founders Unfound. That was Tim Salau, co-founder and CEO of Guide, a platform for bite-sized learning and talent development for enterprise remote teams. As you can tell, Tim is an exciting speaker and visionary on the future of work. Our episode is sponsored by The Plug. The Plug is a one-of-a-kind place to find research, stories, and data about and for the Black tech landscape. They have unique reports and analysis, and members-only calls with some of today's premier thought leaders. Use the code UNFOUND to save $10 on an annual subscription at tpinsights.com, or find a link in the show notes. Now, we've got something new going on here at Founders Unfound. If you are a Black founder who is struggling to get recognition, there's another way to get onto our podcast absolutely for free. Just leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or at podchaser.com. If you do this and identify yourself as a Black founder, I will read your review in an upcoming episode. So make sure to plug your company URL and all the relevant handles. The great thing about podcast episodes, they live on and on and on. So why not? You're basically getting a free ad as a thank you for taking the time to give us a review and support our mission. So be sure to drop your review today. So with that in mind, I want to give a shout out and a big thank you to Laverne Gordon, who gave us 5 stars and wrote, Founders Unfound really hones in on companies that are minority-led to show others who look like us they are just as capable of doing the same or greater. Thank you for creating space. Make sure to check out Laverne's great work with Love Life Now Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the lives of victims and survivors of domestic violence. Find out more at lovelifenow.org or on Twitter at lovelifenowfound. That's F-O-U-N with no D. So thank you, Laverne, for the kind words and the extraordinary mission you are pursuing. Wasn't that great? Now is your chance. Head over to Apple or Podchaser and drop us a review. As always, you can find Founders Unfound anywhere podcasts live, and you can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Founders Unfound. Please follow, like, and share to help us grow. Now, on with the episode. Stay safe and hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to Founders Unfound, spotlighting the best startups you don't know yet. We bring you stories of exceptional founders from underrepresented backgrounds. This is episode number 19 in our series on founders of African descent. I'm your host, Dan Kihanya. Let's get on it. Today we have Tim Salau. Tim is a dynamic speaker, tech influencer, innovator, and he's known as Mr. Future of Work. On top of all that, Tim is co-founder and CEO of Guide, a platform for bite-sized learning and talent development for enterprise remote teams. Welcome to the show, Tim. We're super excited to have you.
Thank you so much, man. It's an honor to be on your show, man. Super excited.
All right. Terrific. So let's start off. Help the listeners understand exactly what Guide is all about.
Yeah. So Guide is the bite-sized learning talent development platform for enterprise remote teams. Employers can actually upskill their workers on Guide by onboarding them. And, we address use cases within the enterprise, such as onboarding and new hire training, as well as marketing and sales enablement. And essentially, your workers can learn and train each other on Guide. So if you have a new worker who wants to be successful in the first 90 days, you can create bite-sized courses on Guide, recorded on Guide for them. And within that first day or that first week that they enter your office and workplace, they'll learn all on Guide.
Awesome. Man, you should be called the future of learning and the future of work.
Yeah, man.
But before we get more into Guide, let's hear a little bit more about you. Can you tell us where you're from and where you grew up?
Yeah, Dan. So grew up actually in Nigeria. We moved here, my family and me, in 1999. In fact, one of the core reasons why my dad moved my family and us to America was because, he really was adamant about giving my sisters and me access to better education. And, growing up in Nigeria around the 90s, the education system wasn't that great. So, for them, my parents, they already had their family, their friends, their community. They even got married in Nigeria. They already had a community there. So it was a huge risk and a huge opportunity as well for them to move us to the United States. But, when we first moved to the United States in 1999, we decided to make home in Houston, Texas, which was Plymouth Rock for us. Yeah, and essentially, man, we've really grown in Texas. So grew up in Texas as a Southerner, and that's why you'll probably hear me say y'all a lot in this podcast. But I've lived in a few other areas such as Seattle, Austin, Texas, and now currently living in Oakland, California, where we're building our company.
Nice. And so how old were you when you moved from Nigeria to Houston area?
I was 6 years old, man.
Do you remember it?
You know what, man? Here's what I remember. I remember being excited to be moving to America. Yeah, don't actually remember too much what life was like when I was younger in Nigeria, and that's really due to the fact that you're so young at that age.
Sure.
So you can't remember too much, but have seen scrapbook pictures, and I was enjoying my life. I had a pretty great group of friends, and there was so much community around me at all times. And so I think for me, fundamentally, I always remember the community that is within our culture, being Nigerian, specifically Yoruba.
Can you recall growing up in Houston, sort of when you sort of realized that you were maybe different than other kids?
Man, I was a walking ball of difference, Dan. I think growing up as an immigrant, you're just different, man. Like, it's like there's no qualms about it. Like, people look at you differently. People can tell that you're different. You kind of dress different in the early days. So, I mean, when we moved out here, my parents weren't wealthy. They weren't made of money. In Nigeria, they were wealthy. Actually, they were doing incredibly well in Nigeria, where if you were thinking about the class system that they were in Nigeria, my parents were doctors. And they worked in hospitals and things of that nature. So they were incredibly doing well for themselves. But when we moved to America, we had to start all over again. So my parents had to go back to school. They kind of relied on friends within our first few years moving to America. So we stayed with friends, but eventually they were able to go back to school, get educated, find jobs to eventually find us a nice little apartment home in the hood of Houston, Texas. And then over time, as they continue to grow in their careers, we eventually moved to the suburbs. But in the early days of when we were in Houston, man, I can remember not really understanding how everything worked. You have to go through an acculturation process,
right?
Especially at that age. So some of my earliest memories were just walking down the streets of Houston and understanding that I lived in the hood. All I saw around me was, I saw a lot of crackheads around me. I saw a lot of violence around me. It wasn't the prettiest. I saw a lot of gangbanging around me. That was my environment to a degree, but it didn't affect me too much because I lived in a loving environment. I lived in a loving home. But that's what I saw every time I would step out of my home. And at the same time, when I would go to school, a lot of people would remind me that I'm different. You'd hear terms such as African booty scratcher, and that's a connotation to just showcase and indicate that you're different. And at that time, I really fell in love with a lot of American customs. So loving basketball, like I really got into basketball, and my favorite player early in the early days of when we moved here was Kobe Bryant, because Kobe Bryant was super hot back then around early 2000 Lakers, right? And all of these different things that are very American culture, I started to fall in love and be enamored by it. But over time, you realize and you start kind of like liking things that you like, and you're not really associating your identity with American identity.
Right. That's interesting. Did you know what you wanted to be? Did your parents sort of basically put this on you and your sisters about like, hey, we came here, so you need to sort of pursue these sort of opportunities? Or did you have any sort of sense of what direction you wanted to go?
Man, it's interesting that in African culture, your parents either want you to be an engineer, some sort of rocket scientist, or a doctor, right? Engineer, scientist, doctor. And it's, that's it. That's pretty much it.
Right.
But, one of the things is I've always had an affinity for technology and design. So I like to consider myself as a design technologist, first and foremost, a designer. I love design. I love crafting. I love bringing things together. And for me, design wasn't something that my parents knew Neither of my parents are designers, but at an early age, I've always been fascinated by puzzle pieces or how things work and the systems around things. So I, by default, always think like a designer in a lot of the work that I did. And eventually that led me to, going to Texas Tech University and getting my psychology degree. And around my third year of my studying and getting my psychology degree, I decided I really wanted to get into UX design, and eventually went and got my master's at University of Texas at Austin around information studies in design, right? And eventually that led me to working with Google, eventually led me to working with Microsoft. I've worked with Facebook in a capacity as well. So like my entire life has been kind of like, at this point, my entire career has been this kind of passion of like, how do I design things? And at the same time, how does it kind of come back to my core passion on building community? But we'd love to hear your thoughts, Dan. For you, kind of like, were your options already settled in terms of what you were going to be your career, man?
No, I've talked about this before. I mean, my parents were all about three things, really: service, religion, and education. And as long as those three legs of the stool were getting the appropriate amount of attention, then they kind of left it to me. Although my dad is from Africa, he's from Kenya, and he was an engineer. And so, yeah, there was this inclination of, I wasn't going to be, sort of a 9-to-5 uneducated person in terms of what I was going to have for opportunities. But yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But tell us, did you have a sense of what entrepreneurship was? Because all the things that you just said, design, community, puzzles, I mean, these are the tenets of entrepreneurship. And to some degree, did you have a sense of that? Did you know people who were entrepreneurs when you were young and growing up?
Nope. Didn't know people who are entrepreneurs. I mean, my closest and my personal definition of entrepreneurship, being of service to a degree, is how are you serving your community? It's how are you creating things for others? Like, what are you doing to be of service? And the best example of that for me early on in my career has always been my dad, who built a church because he was so passionate about the work that he does as a pastor. He built a church around 2007. And yeah, I would always remember growing up, seeing him being so diligent in building that community within our church. And I think for me, that was an example of entrepreneurship. And it's really a matter of how you building community, how you bringing people together, how you being of service to your fellow man. And what kind of value are you creating for people? For my dad, he was creating a value of fellowship and community and kind of purpose, right? Like, but it was in the vehicle of a church, right? And as anyone knows who's ever built a church, building a church is also building a business too at the same time. But my dad, he's a very mild-mannered guy. Our church is still very, very small. But for me, that was like the best example I had of an entrepreneur growing up. But, and as I grow old and now I'm an entrepreneur, I'm kind of defining what that looks like for me. And, and a lot of the people that kind of like look to me as an inspiration for a leader. And by default, to your point, Dan, entrepreneurship is simply put, designing and being able to adapt and build something of value for people, right? Like fundamentally, it's not as complex as some people sometimes make it out to be, in my opinion.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, can you build something that adds values to people's lives that doesn't exist today, or at least nobody's doing it the way that you want to do it?
Yeah.
You graduate with this awesome combination of psychology and sort of the world of design and UX. And so you work with these companies. How did the entrepreneurial spark get lit? I mean, what were the things or the events or sort of the background around, okay, I got to go build a company? How did that come about?
Yeah, definitely did not just set out one day and woke up and say, I have to build a company. In fact, I don't think anyone should ever even think like that. I would just wake up one day, I want to build a company. Because being a founder, and there's a difference, and I actually just shared a post on this on my LinkedIn. There's a difference between being a founder and being a serial entrepreneur, right? I'm personally a serial entrepreneur and a founder, right? Founders build things because they want to build movement. They really have a very clear vision for the world. And they won't give up until that vision is a reality, right? Serial entrepreneurs, they build things, they can sell it, they trade it, they can capitalize on it, but they're always building things. And even for me, outside of the work that I do as our CEO of Guide, I dabble in a lot of other things. I have like my own tea line that I'm currently working on. Like I'm always building or kind of interested in something as an entrepreneur. But for me, for what we're building with Guide, it's a venture. It's something that's very, very long term. So you have to treat it with a lot of patience. And for me, this kind of spark to be an entrepreneur, but more importantly, a founder really began when, I've worked with big companies. I've seen how WeWork works. I've seen how Google works. I've seen how Microsoft works. I've had a lot of those experiences. And fundamentally, I've been like building, we've been building this movement that we call Guide for years now. I started with building the community in 2017, which was a Facebook community and has grown over 300,000 people strong worldwide. And then, I met my co-founder, Taban Cosmos, while I was working with Microsoft. And, he really brought that technology CTO mind to what we're doing and the passion that we both share in terms of educating and inspiring people. And all of that has kind of cycled into what we now have as a Guide. So there was a cascading of multiple different things that actually led to us building this venture that is like our company. But us as entrepreneurs, we're always looking to create. We're always looking to create solutions that add value. And I think that for me, entrepreneurship fundamentally goes back to what we're talking about, Dan. How can we add value to people, right? In a way where you're bringing them more joy than you are pain, or maybe more importantly, you're solving a fundamental problem that they're looking for a solution for. And I think there's always going to be room for that. If you as a individual, you're always looking to be of service, right? Would love to get your thoughts on this, man.
You really hit on this really interesting word, movement, right? Which I think if you look at some of the bigger successful startups, especially the ones that sort of appeal or go directly to consumers, it really is about a movement. It's about sort of the status quo hasn't served us in a certain way. I feel it, I sense it, I experience it alongside you, Mr. or Ms. Customer. And let's figure out a way to make the world better. And we'll do it with products, we'll do it with service, we'll do it with experiences and focus in, certain aspects of life. But I love that term movement and having a service mindset. So, I think that's where success comes from. It's not just about, can I make a widget or a tool, that'll get you to pay $10 a month or something like that. So we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back with Tim Salau from Guide.
Woo!
Who gets to be called innovative or genius? If we look at the current media landscape today, we often don't see people of color dominating the business or tech news headlines. I'm Sherelle Dorsey, data journalist and founder of The Plug. Our work in reporting has been featured in and used by top names like Vice, The Information, and casting directors at ABC's Shark Tank. The Plug cuts out the noise to bring you news, insights, and analysis of trends shaping venture capital, startups, policy, and ecosystems within Black innovation communities. Join our annual Pro membership and get exclusive access to our weekly long-form reporting and monthly member calls, which puts you directly at the table with leading innovators and firms around the country. Also access our data libraries of indexes such as our Black-owned VC Firms Index or the top 100 Black researchers in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Use code UNFOUND to save $10 on our annual subscription at tpinsights.com. That's T as in the and P as in plug, insights.com.
So we're back with Tim. And so, Tim, we just started on the backside of the break talking about the beginning of the journey for Guide. Tell us more about sort of when you and your co-founder decided to ratchet this thing up and really just sort of launch it and say, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, man. So it was literally about a year and a half ago that Taban and me decided to start building Guide. And literally a friend of ours called Chad Oda connected us. Right. Chad was like, hey, Taman, you're really passionate about building something in the area of mentorship and education and skills training. I know another guy named Tim Salau who's passionate about the same thing. And Chad introduced us together. And the next thing a few days later, I told Taban I would love to meet up with you at a coffee shop. From the first time we met, Taban and me really just hit it off very, very well. It's due to the fact that we're both immigrants. We're both incredibly, incredibly passionate about technology. We're always thinking. And then we're both highly entrepreneurial. We're creatives, right? In that regard, we're always looking for like, what can we create? How can we serve people? Very service oriented. So fundamentally, we share the same value. And, at that time, Taban was actually building this product that was kind of a LinkedIn lookalike called Giraffe. It wasn't really a product that we could like go to market with or really build a venture around. So eventually we started looking for what are some of the problems we can solve in the education space in terms of helping people with upskilling and skills training. And eventually we met our former operator and still a co-founder, because once you're a founder, you're forever a founder, in my opinion. Our co-founder, Mike Yates, who's no longer operationally with the company, but he really kind of helped us say, hey, maybe you all should focus on addressing the problem around life skills in ed tech and high school education. So we dabbled in that market for quite some time. And then eventually, we pivoted around when COVID-19 happened and really more so are now focused on enterprise. But it really started with, me meeting Taban and really like loving his spirit, loving his heart for building things. And ever since then, man, it's been a year and a half we've been on our journey. And we are building our incredibly powerful movement and community. And I think one of the things personally that we're grateful for is that we're seeing it. And, since we've launched, we continue to see a lot of great testimonials and reaction around the product.
Nice. We're in this pandemic, and obviously at a personal level and a societal level, we're seeing lots of impact. But tell us more about how you sort of adjusted how Guide would address the opportunities that may have gone away or the new ones that may have come about because of COVID-19.
Yeah, so we were already building Guide on enterprise-grade infrastructure. And when COVID-19 happened, it just kind of fast-tracked the shift towards remote work. And more importantly, enabling a decentralized workforce. And for us, the way we're designing Guide was always kind of a fit for this trend of the future of work. And, for me personally, have been studying the future of work for a few years now. And it's why many people refer to me as Mr. Future Work, which was kind of a title that I started a few years ago because I was so passionate about this space. So, being kind of a practitioner and at the same time realizing what we're building and how the ed tech market really wasn't the market for us to build sustainable business in. It was really we saw that the market opportunity actually opened up for us in a greater scope. So, to a degree, we still allow people to individually buy a subscription to Guide. But now our focus is more of how do we empower like the entire and enterprise workforce. And I think for us, the opportunities that opened up is that now everyone is learning, working, and fundamentally living their life from home, right? Taking care of your family.
Yeah.
Taking your kids to school. Ordering in driverless and fundamentally also learning and kind of like taking control of your career from home. So, we literally around COVID-19, we pivoted the company to saying, okay, we'll build the web app and we have a mobile app that's coming out soon. But fundamentally, it's funny that when we pivoted the company, nothing really changed about our core mission at the end of the day, kind of like the what changed, but our why never changed. And I think it goes to our point in this conversation that we're having, Daniel, is that like it takes a movement to like really change things. When you're building a company or you're an upstart, you're a startup, you really have to lead with the movement, but you should never change that why. The what can look different, but the why can never change. So for us, what opened up was like a bigger market. And what didn't change really was, our core reason for why we exist as a company and kind of like the venture and the movement we're building.
That's so important. And hey, on Foundation out there's a little nugget from Tim. A lot of people think about startups like you're inventing something and it's about the idea. It is about saying, hey, the world needs to change in a certain way, or there's a problem that needs to be fixed. And I'm going to try to do it a certain way based upon what the world has told me and where the opportunity lies, but it may change. And so this is a great testament to that. But take us, I'm really interested in this because I've talked to other companies that have gone through this. Take us back to the point where you and Taban said, hey, this is something we need to think about doing differently. Was it like one of those Friday afternoon, like, what are we going to do? Or was it a series of conversations? Or when was sort of that decision and how did that come about of saying, okay, yes, let's try this other opportunity or let's try this other direction, I should say?
Yeah, absolutely. I could take you back to this moment because it was a very interesting move. And literally, when we decided to pivot right before then, our former CEO and our co-founder, Mike Yates, decided to leave the company, which it was understandable why he was leaving. It was COVID-19. Like he had to so Mike actually had a family and he had other responsibilities and other things going on outside of the company we were building. So, he had to really focus on everything else he had going on. So he decided to leave the company. So right before then, and around that time as well, we were also thinking about like, how are we building a sustainable business model? Because we didn't really have a business model that fit the product that we were trying to build in a sense, right? So initially our business model was ad-based. Was focused on ad-based revenue. But if you were to think about, like, let's go back to a few months ago when COVID-19 really made waves in America, every ad-based businesses right now are all struggling. Even if some of them aren't struggling from a revenue standpoint, a lot of them are struggling from a public scrutiny standpoint, right? So a great test case example would be Twitter recently got hacked. Facebook continues to struggle with moderation and quality and kind of like, how are they really vetting the people who post ads on their platform, right? There's a lot of scrutiny involved there, right? So ad-based businesses have been struggling. And then fundamentally, an ad-based business model based on the way we were trying to build the product didn't really make sense for the market we were formerly in terms of ed tech. And it didn't make sense because we would have been trying to do too much. One, trying to build enough of an audience and at the same time trying to build enough of a supply side, right? To kind of continue keeping us going. The ed tech market is just super volatile, right? Every school is different. Every teacher has different needs. Every state has different kind of ordinances around education. Right. Really a clear path to predictability if you want to build a sustainable business in that space. So you have to be in it for a quiet fight, but it's just a very volatile market. So it's not the best market to build an actual business in. So around the time when Mike, decided to leave, we were already reconsidering what do we need to do better so we can continue to sustain the business. And, for me, it was, the writing was on the wall. The way we were building Guide, how we were already thinking about the product, and then what our vision was and our mission was, I was like, let's just go into enterprise, right? Because we had the capacity and we had the capability of, we could just, everything we were building, we didn't have to throw it away. We can actually just kind of repurpose it for a different world, right? To your point, Dan. And it was a matter of like saying, oh, well, we're already building a social learning platform, but maybe it's a better opportunity and it's much more better for our business that we build it in a market where there's actually a more of a need and demand versus an ed tech. And then more importantly, we can build actually a predictable and sustainable business, especially when you're an enterprise. There's much more of a consistent kind of expectation on what the sales motion could be or who your target buyer can be, right? In terms of their size and being the fact that every company overnight shifted to being a remote company, the market is huge, right? There's no ceiling even in terms of on what your market cap can be, right? So you can build as big of a business as possible in, learning and development right now, which is a healthy and growing market. So, you just see all of those signals as an entrepreneur and as a business person, and you make that pivot. And that's another thing, Dan, that I think we should probably talk about is like how as a founder, you shouldn't give up, but also as an entrepreneur, like you should always be open to pivoting because the reality is that if you're building a business, like, and you care about the business, you care about the mission, like there's always possibilities. There's always an opportunity out there. But one of the things that, is kind of, it's sad to me that there's a lot of founders and a lot of entrepreneurs give up too soon, right? And for example, like we all went through COVID-19. I went through COVID-19. Dan's gone through COVID-19. Anyone that went through COVID-19, but for us, that wasn't kind of the death of our business or our company or our movement. It was more like, oh, this is a blessing in disguise, right? And I think one of the things I often encourage entrepreneurs and founders to think about is like, why not? How can you see your business from a different lens? And how do you see kind of whatever you're building from an opportunistic standpoint, not a pessimistic?
I love that. And you're right. And I think that's part of the resilience that needs to be kind of core to your constituency, so to speak, or your constitution, I guess is the word I'm looking for, because it is about, this, I liken it to, sort of, we would probably be some of those explorers back in the 14 and 1500s, right? It's like, somebody said India's over there on the other side of this big ocean, and I don't know how to get there, but I'm going to go try and see if I can find it. And I'm going to sail north for a while and then figure out, it's getting cold. India's not cold. I don't think that's the right way. We need to go back the other direction. But you're right. It's like keeping this large vision, this mission in mind, and just knowing that the steps that are going to take you there, the twists and turns are going to be a meandering journey potentially. And so, I love that. So tell us a little bit more about the business itself. I mean, do you sell to companies or individuals in companies? Is this subscription based or how does that work?
Yeah, man. So it's subscription based. So it's B2B, B2C, but primarily B2B. B2B is our key revenue driver, right? So us selling subscriptions to businesses who have their workers, whether it be 100 to 10,000s, kind of onboard them to Guide. And we charge businesses $30 per individual head. That allows us to really, really kind of like scale and at the same time be able to have quality on the platform because they're using it for their own internal use cases, such as, new hire onboarding, sales enablement, leadership training. Right. And the real powerful thing about us as a business is the fact that we're end to end integrated in terms of like on Guide. There's a camera you can use to record and create the courses that you can immediately post on the platform. And then there's a feed where, your people can learn and kind of get the latest bite-sized training content that anyone within your employee base has created. And, for us, our vision is that we see every creator within the enterprise as a creator, right? Like any worker, if you're a subject matter expert, you're a creator. We want you creating on Guide, every single one. So we have like this very powerful vision of like every single creator within an enterprise and really broadly the world can create courses on Guide. So if you can't learn on Guide and buy an individual subscription for yourself because you may not work for a big enterprise company, you can at least go into an enterprise that has Guide and you can use it to learn from your fellow CEO or your peer, right? And even within Guide internally, we use Guide to train each other and for kind of things such as internal comms. So we're getting a lot of love around it, where I was actually talking to a chief people officer the other day and she was like, look, I don't have the budget, but hey, we're interested in growing with you all, right? Like, and I told her like, it's cool. We're a low cost solution based on how we're positioned in the market, right? So like you may not have, we don't need that big of a budget, but we truly love partnering with great companies who believe in our mission and our vision. And, it was just so funny to hear her just be frank about, hey, I don't have the budget, but would love to work with you and partner with you. I think it's a true testament to kind of what we're building.
That's a great story. And as you think about sort of where you want to go, what's kind of the big vision for Guide? Is there like a number or a market share or number of people learning?
Yeah, the big vision is very simple. We believe we want to empower every creator with the skills, mindset, and opportunities for a fulfilling career. We really fundamentally mean that. And, right now there's an estimated 7 billion people on Earth. By 2025, it will be 8.1 billion people. And the big vision for me is, we'll know we've achieved our mission when we see every single person with the necessary skills, opportunities to lead and design a career path that brings them fulfillment and allows them to take care of their families. I think we have a very unique strategy in terms of how we're getting there as a business. And, for me, fundamentally, when I think about product and my philosophy around product, there are very few winner take all markets. There, even in a market such as L&D, where there's a lot of different players, we have a very unique value prop. So I think I will be satisfied when all 8.1 soon to be billion people on Earth have access to a Guide course. Right? And as a founder, it has to be like that because it's actually possible. It's actually possible for us to do that. It takes time. And that's why I often, and I love being on your show, Dan, because it's founders, right? Like if this is about founders, it's like founders have to realize it takes time, right? It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen through a recession. It doesn't happen within the chaos of the storm that is a COVID-19. It takes time, but it will happen. And, the same can be said of a Microsoft or Amazon. Those founders made it happen, right? Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos made it happen. The Mark Zuckerbergs, they made it happen, even if you don't like the product too much right now, right? Whoever made CVS, he or she made it happen.
Right.
Founders make it happen and it goes beyond them. And that's founder mentality. And I think that, it's really I'm happy that we're talking about it because I don't really get a chance to talk about this on a lot of different podcasts.
Nice. We're going to dive more into some of that for sure. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back with Tim Salau from Guide.
Who gets to be called innovative or genius? If we look at the current media landscape today, we often don't see people of color dominating the business or tech news headlines. I'm Sherelle Dorsey, data journalist and founder of The Plug. Our work in reporting has been featured in and used by top names like Vice, The Information, and casting directors at ABC's Shark Tank. The Plug cuts out the noise to bring you news, insights, and analysis of trends shaping venture capital, startups, policy, and ecosystems within Black innovation communities. Join our annual Pro membership and get exclusive access to our weekly long-form reporting and monthly member calls, which puts you directly at the table with leading innovators and firms around the country. Also access our data libraries of indexes such as our Black-owned VC firms index or the top 100 Black researchers in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Use code UNFOUND to save $10 on our annual subscription at tpinsights.com. That's T as in the and P as in plug, insights.com.
So we're back with Tim Salau from Guide. So Tim, I'm fascinated by this. You've got a remote team. You've got the dynamics of COVID, one of the co-founders moving out. How have you been able to handle just every day getting up and trying to sort of build the business in this environment?
Man, dude, I feel so fulfilled every day I work on Guide because it's progress over perfection. It's progress over perfection.
I love that.
Founders think a certain type of way, Dan, because you talk to founders, you know how this is. There's the world, there's your product / business, and then there's you, the founder. You actually live in a completely different reality.
That's true. That is so true.
You don't live where the world is. You live where the world is going, or more importantly, where you want to take world, right? And you want to take the people who are your customers, who you are in service to, right? And so for me, we were able to push through COVID-19 with ease, and we pivoted the business within 2 to 3 days. And we actually were able to go to market within 3 months within that pivot, right? Because we were building a mobile app, but then we had to build a web app as a supporting component to the mobile app and then position our business entirely. We did that all within 3 months because we're a small, lean team. But even if we were operating at a bigger scale, it would have still have been that fast because we're founders, right? And I'm the founding and operating CEO of the company. But for me, it was like building a business and leading a company or leading, our team through a crisis like this. We're in service to customers. We're in service to our mission. So it wasn't even I not once did we even think about, COVID-19 happened. We should shut out. We should stop. Like I didn't even think like that. Like not once, because it was a matter of like, what can we do to ensure that we thrive through this?
Right.
Still are focused on our mission, but maybe we have to change how or the what, or, kind of go through this process of saying, okay, is there a better way to do what we need to do given our current climate, right? And I think that's how you have to think as a founder is like, what's possible even though maybe this door has shut. And for us, it was realizing that, we aren't going to grow a successful, sustainable business just focused on high school education because that just isn't a big enough market and it's way too volatile. It's better that we focus completely enterprise and we really, we position ourselves as an enterprise company. We did that in less than 3 months, right? And for me as a founder, it wasn't like we made any sacrifices. We're adapting. You have to be able to adapt as a founder. You have to be able to understand, the world is saying this. All right, we'll go this, right? And you have to be able to understand when you're receiving those signals because context does matter as you adapt. And make sure you're adapting in the direction of your why, not in the direction of where your competition wants to take you or something that doesn't align with you. And I think that's my biggest tip to any founder listening is that understand that the why is your North Star, right? And you can always adapt your business to your why. And another great example I want to give for this is, look at the Salesforce or Airbnb, right? Like Mark Benioff is one of the greatest founders in the world. I love that guy. And that's just because you could just see how he often can always make a business opportunity out of anything, right? Like COVID-19 happens. Salesforce.com, what they announced work.com, like work.co. And it's essentially helping states, local governments, and even enterprise businesses adapt to COVID-19, right? Boom, using Salesforce and their CRM and as well as their kind of all the other things that Salesforce has going on, right?
Right.
I'll just make a business opportunity out of this because I want to be of service to my customers. Airbnb, Brian Jeske, right? They pivoted the business to say, okay, how do we offer online experiences that hosts can manage, right? You have to think like that when you're a founder. And, for me, man, I think that COVID-19, it actually really kind of bolstered our vision, and I often have to be mindful of saying that because a lot of businesses died due to COVID-19, but our business, it hasn't died at all.
But I think you're right. It's this combination of fortitude and attitude, right? Do I have the resilience? Do I have sort of the glass half full viewpoint of, okay, how can we use this as a way for us to do something better or different or respond in a certain way? And that's very entrepreneurial, very founder centric for sure. Let's switch gears a little bit. And we like to talk on the show a little bit about being a Black founder. So you and your co-founder, both immigrants, African heritage. Are you reminded of that regularly in your entrepreneurial journey? Is it something that comes up either positively or more of a challenge through day to day in your interactions with the outside world?
It's funny, man. First of all, I'm a privileged Black founder. Even me as a Black founder, I have to recognize privilege because I've worked with some of the top companies in the world, man. In Microsoft, Google, Facebook, like I've been there, done that. And now we're building our own company. And I think that what I don't like often is that there is this stigma in the world where you always have to remind every Black founder that you're Black, so we should give you a piecemeal. We should recognize the fact that you're Black and not treat you as equal to any other founder, right? With an idea or a vision and the charisma and the passion to make it happen, right? And that's why I'm very, very focused on, even with building our company, we're very focused on ethics and equity, right? And, for me, as I've been fundraising, I'm grateful enough to say that whenever I've talked to an investor, I have not received any disrespect as a Black founder. It's fundraising is hard, no matter if you're Black or white. For some people who are privileged and white and who come from the money, it's quite easy. It's not hard at all, right? It's absolutely not hard. And when you look at the stats of the fact that there's only 1% of venture capital goes to Black and brown and people in minority categories, that's fundamentally, there's a problem with that. But when you think about being a Black founder in this climate and kind of seeing the attention, everything the last 6 months has brought to what the future of work, what the future of venture capital looks like, I think I'm optimistic that things are changing. But fundamentally, I'm grateful. And I'm saying that's from a privileged sense because I've worked in tech and I know tech and I know the lingo and I know how to do all of these things. Like I haven't received any disrespect, but I always have to kind of come from a place of compassion when I'm meeting other Black founders who don't have as big of a brand as I, or they haven't been privileged to do the things that I've done, and they completely don't get the opportunities or don't get the respect that they deserve when they're pitching or when they're fundraising, right? And it really goes back to what we need to do as an entire ecosystem and as leaders in building more equity within the fundraising process. And what I believe that looks like is not always having to remind Black founders that they're Black. In fact, we can actually take a more positive connotation, remind them that they themselves can actually build a sustainable business without needing venture capital, because not every business needs venture capital, and recognizing that giving them the same fair access to capital, right? So I'm very much so against a lot of funds or firms who kind of say, we'll just, put aside 5 million just for Black founders, right? Like that's weird. And I think it's actually very unethical because that's not how you should treat, especially in the fundraising process. When you try to kind of use tokenism or you try to just pull away a bit of what you have just for a small pool, that's actually tokenism and it's actually causing further marginalization. And it's actually not healthy at all because it makes it seem as if that same individual, that same Black founder who has the same idea, who has the same potential to build an amazing billion-dollar business isn't equal to or has the same level of potential as their white or their privileged counterpart. So I'm often very against, firms and people who do that because that's not the right way we should go about kind of empowering marginalized and underappreciated founders.
That's quite an interesting viewpoint. So what do you think are some of the ways that we can overcome that?
Yeah, I love that you asked this. I love companies and founders now. Like, shout out to Mrs. Arlen Hamilton. Who doesn't know her? She's building an amazing, amazing legacy and movement in what she's doing with Backstage Capital, investing in diverse founders. And if you look at her portfolio, like diverse founders for her is LGBTQIA+, Black, brown. It doesn't mean that you can't be white because she's invested in some white founders as well who are a part of her portfolio. People who come literally from diverse, non-traditional backgrounds, like literally diverse, like it's a wide variety. And right. You literally see it on her site. It's very evident, it's very visible. That's brilliant. So that's one angle. So let's say for all of the traditional firms and VCs who maybe can't build their own, like just diverse focused fund, there's actually things that you can do from how you recruit potential associates, partners, GPs, MPs into your fund to ensure that they're all thinking about your portfolio as well as your firm's portfolio management structure from a place of equity, right? So essentially, I'm an investor, I invest, so I know a lot of what goes on behind the scenes. Essentially, what's really wrong is that there's too many, how do I say this? A lot of firms operate based on the kind of like this insider network model, right? Where I know, where a friend of mine who's either the, white enterprise CEO of this company refers to me to this company, and the founder fits the same stereotype of a founder, which is Caucasian, male, went to Stanford, or has this very privileged background that I recognize, I can relate with. And for me, it signals that they might be building a high margin business in 7 to 10 years, right?
Right.
A way to think about investing, it actually categorizes you from the bunch of other opportunities from people who may not fit that same model. And it's the worst ways to scout, right? So the best investment method that you can actually build within your investment firm is actually, more importantly, thinking about one, it starts with hiring. Just hire diverse people. Like fundamentally, hire associates who didn't just go to Stanford. Hire people who want to be associates that maybe went to West Governors University or Texas Tech University, right? Like, do all of those different things, but also have a very non-traditional path themselves, right? One, or maybe having a focused thesis, and then make sure you're proactively scouting. And when you're maybe looking for scouts, try to make sure that you have a diverse ecosystem of scouts that maybe are at universities or at part of accelerators, and ensure that they're diverse as well, right? So make sure that you have this insider network, but also an outsider network to match it and to kind of ensure that you're not a part of what we consider network bias, right? So you're not biased to only choose a certain type of founder and their, specific business that fits your thesis, right? So within whatever thesis that you found for your company and your investment portfolio, stick to your thesis. But even as you select, the selection criteria needs to change. And it changes when you start actually making sure that you, one, are nurturing diversity within your firm structure. But more importantly, you're using a scouting method that completely is objective and ensures that you're looking proactively for diverse founders, right? Founders who do not fit the traditional stereotype and mold. And only very few firms who are a part of that traditional VC model do that.
And that's a great playbook. I love that. This idea of an inside network and an outside network and reaching out. And I totally agree. I think diversity is really the ultimate norm we want to get to. And diversity means many different aspects, right? It can be of thought, of heritage, of background, of experience, of perspective, right? And, I've said this before, but it's pretty common, academic research now that diversity of input creates a better outcome. And so I love what you're saying there. So I want to be conscious of your time, and this is a great conversation. But before we go, I just want to make sure to let you give a shout out for if people want to find out more about Guide, about Mr. Future of Work, about anything, any social handles or ways that you'd recommend people find out more or get in touch with you.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about Guide and the movement that we're building, please check us out, guideapp.co. Sign up for early access. We're in beta. Always in beta, forever in beta. We're building quite the movement. We're really excited. My co-founder and I, we're Black founders. We own a majority of our company, which a lot of founders can't say. I think for anyone that's listening right now, never let anyone tell you that you can't do it. Never let anyone tell you that you can't build software, you can't build a company, you can't build a venture, you can't lead your movement. Never let anyone put any kind of doubt in your mind to tell you that you can't do something, because we're doing it. And, when we look at the stats, we look at the odds, none of that phases us, right? Because we already know what we're building is so powerful. And more importantly, the world needs it. So if you ever are building something the world needs, keep going, keep pushing. And check out guideapp.co because we're building something that the world needs.
I love it. You're a superhero. Well, thanks again, Tim. Really appreciate you taking the time. This has been great.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
We'd like to thank our guest, Tim Salau, and our sponsor, The Plug. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, or simply go to foundersunfound.com/listen to. That's listen to. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram @foundersunfound. This podcast was produced by Dan Quijana, editing and production by Internet Radio Corporation, social media and other promotion by Umama Marzouk. Our music was composed and arranged by Michael Quijana. I am Dan Quijana, and you've been listening to Founders Unfound.